Hello, and welcome back to another episode of The End Game Insiders on Your Side. We're a podcast that's been developed for senior lab executives by senior lab executives. And my name is Melissa Butterworth, and I am your proud host of the End Game podcast. I am super excited about today. Not only do we have an amazing guest that's joining us, and I'm going to talk to you a little bit about him in a few minutes, but we've got a really exciting topic. Today's topic is going to be pathologists, the quarterback of healthcare. I just love that topic. And I've got Dr. Aamir Ehsan with me, who I've known for probably a little bit over 4 years. I was thinking about it this morning, Dr. Ehsan, that I first met you in a little town of Victoria, Texas. And I remembered, and I had forgotten this, but you and I had traveled not only to like the little town of Victoria together, but we actually traveled during the middle of COVID in Tennessee. I don't know if you remember that or not, but it was such a fun trip. Visiting another very reputable pathology practice, but that was a lot of fun. And before I actually officially introduce you today, I always like to share with our guest a little fun fact. And I've got a little juicy fun fact about Dr. Ehsan. Actually, when he was about 8 years old, I learned that he was taking karate and he really wanted to get his black belt. So he realized that it was going to probably take up to 2 years to kind of migrate up to achieving the black belt. So he just decided, why don't I just get my white belt and make it black? I thought that was so funny, but I guess the moral of the story, and one of the things you shared with me, Dr. Ehsan, is that there's no shortcuts in life. And so I really, really like that story. And I'm just so happy to have you here today and so appreciative that you took the time to join us. So welcome.
Thank you very much, Melissa. I'm very excited to be here. And thank you for sharing that fun story. I learned my lesson for sure that there is no shortcut in life. And I'm very excited and happy to be part of this podcast.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. You know, it kind of goes hand in hand with the story that I just shared. You know, I wasn't going to share this, but things kind of take twists and turns. But I'm wearing a little pendant here, and it's a bumblebee, and it's something that my mom gave to me when I graduated from college. And she gave it to me because she said that the bumblebee is not supposed to be able to fly because aerodynamically the body is too big, right, for its wings, but it does anyway. So the moral of the story is you can do anything that you put your mind to in life. And you have just done some incredible things. And we're going to get into that today. I'm just so proud of you. I consider you a colleague, somebody who I really look up to. And you've also become a friend. So I'm very happy to have you here today. And before we jump into our podcast, can you give us just a brief introduction about yourself and your background? And, a little bit about what you're doing today. And then we'll jump right into our podcast.
Yeah, thank you for the nice comments. Aamir Ehsan here. I'm board certified anatomic and clinical pathologist, and I'm also subspecialized and certified in hematopathology, molecular genetics, and transfusion medicine. I worked about 15 years in academia, and then about 20 years in the federal government in Audie Murphy VA Hospital. And then back then in 2009, for 15 years ago, I started CorePath as a single person pathologist, and very excited to be the president, CEO, and the medical director of CorePath.
Yeah, you know what? You've got such an amazing background, and I can't say enough positive things about your organization and the people in your organization. But before we get into CorePath and how it started back in 2009, tell me a little bit about your opinion as to why you see pathologists as being the true quarterback of healthcare.
Yeah, so it's kind of interesting. If you look at the sport itself, the quarterback is the key person who, even though not scored the numbers and the goals and stuff, but is the anchor for the whole team to move the things forward. So when you look at the healthcare system, first of all, we need to understand who pathologists are and how they are trained. So pathologists are just like going to the medical school, either the DO program or an MD program. And after that, they go through a very rigorous residency and fellowship training that can last like 4 to 6 years. And after that extensive training, they get board certified in different field and subspecialty of pathology. So they are just like physicians, but have taken a different course to understand the diseases. So typically, to a common man, a pathologist are someone who has been responsible for blood draw or doing autopsies. But I can tell you, like in my whole experience in pathology, I have not performed more than 100 autopsies, but I have touched like millions of live patients' lives through diagnosis and things like that. So that's a misconception. It's a fascinating field. For example, why it's called, the quarterback of healthcare. With this background and with this training, no matter where you are, whether you are working in a hospital-based setting or a reference lab setting, it is considered that 70 to 80% of the data or the decision in healthcare is based on pathology data. Whether it's your CBC, chemistry, laboratory results, genetic results, everything is data-driven, and the decisions are being made. For example, if the patients are going to be discharged early, um, physicians are rounding, they have to wait for the results for CBC, chemistry, immunology, and all microbiology results to clear up the patient and discharge the patients. If you have a patient who's undergoing cancer evaluation and diagnosis, we all know that the time is the key thing, and the clock is ticking, and everybody is waiting for the pathology result to not only to make the diagnosis but to start the treatment. If you look at a patient going with the chest pain into the ER, the heart attack, that diagnosis is made on the pathology result like troponin and things like that. If you are having a diabetic patient, all the monitoring of the diabetes, hemoglobin A1C, the blood glucose, whether you're pregnant, non-pregnant, is based on the pathology data. Anyone who is having a kidney disease, liver disease, all the decisions are being based on relevant pathology data. Now come to the genetic disorders. Many
Yeah.
genetic disorders, you make the diagnosis based on some NGS, some mutation results, and so many things going on. So I can go on and on, but I'm just trying to give you the list of very high level decision making that really based on the pathology data. So thus, I feel the pathologists are truly the quarterback of the healthcare system. Unfortunately or fortunately, you can say that most of the time the pathology or the pathologists have been taken as a cost center model, but there is definitely an opportunity to take a step back and look at the whole pathology concept, especially in the reference lab setting, that this can be a revenue enhancing model.
Wow. You know what? You just opened up so many thoughts in my head about, I think you've really covered the whole broad spectrum, right? I mean, I think we in the healthcare field, especially on the business side, tend to get away from what's really important, which is patient care, right? And, we've all been affected by it, right? I mean, my dad's actually in heart surgery today. And so you mentioned like, the importance of whether it's, dealing with cardiovascular or cancer. I think it, all over the spectrum, it's really touched everybody to some extent. So that's really a great point. And I agree with you. I can see, I love when you sent me the title of pathologist being the quarterback, and I have to agree with that. You started CorePath back in 2009, and you all have been extremely successful, and you made such amazing headway so quickly. What do you attribute to that? And what are the factors that have led to such a positive reputation and to all of your success?
Yeah, so when I was in academia and also in a bigger healthcare system in the federal government, there were some opportunities to improve, and there are also a lot of positive things that happen in both healthcare system. So when I kind of thought about, well, there are so many pain points in healthcare, and there are so many pain points in pathology itself. How can I bring the good things of both academia and private enterprise together? Um, so the key thing for me was to have a solid foundation in any business that you start, and to have a quality work. I mean, if you have the right ingredients, success is always going to be there. Keeping in mind that when you start the initial business, the data says that about 20% of the businesses are going to be successful. So you need to be courageous. You need to have understanding and and the confidence that you have what you're going to be doing, right? So with that background of training and that expertise, I realized that American healthcare system is a combination and a team effort of both physicians and healthcare executives. So if the physicians are leading along with the healthcare executive, that's always a better model. And how can we bring both academic and private enterprise together? There's always good to academia, there's always good to private, and that has been lacking most of the time. So that was another, goal that I have, to create some environment like that. The third thing was, you need to be more innovative and have some breakthrough. And innovation is not like something magic or something. It's just like doing the things in a different way, and come up with some solution to the industry. I knew that practicing pathology is going to be very easy for me, but it's going to be more like other things, like integration of the reports, the lab information system. And I'm talking about lab information system back in 2009, when there was no concept of a cloud-based operation of LIS. So I knew that future is going to be cloud-based, and rather than buying a closed product of LIS, why not we build our own, which we call LabWiser, and we hired a bunch of IT developer, and we worked very hard for about 5-7 years to make it a product which is so much customizable as of today. And that was one of the very important thing that I did back then, to invest more time and energy and effort in developing a customizable LabWiser solution. So we address the pain points. We never deviated by personalized attention. Always phone call to a patient, or a phone call to a physician or oncologist is welcome. And I mean, we don't take these numbers as a number. We take every number we are dealing with the patient's life. So I think the personalized attention, along with quality work and a good planning and how to put the team together, were the key features in the success of CorePath.
Wow. I mean, you know what? Can you believe I was just thinking to myself, this is like your 15-year anniversary pretty much. That's pretty amazing, right? I'm sure like when you look back, you can't believe it. It's probably just gone like that. But I'm really, really proud of you. I have such an admiration for fellow entrepreneurs. But incredible, right? To see how quickly time goes.
Absolutely. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Yeah. Tell me, I mean, how are things different now in the laboratory space than they were 10 years ago?
Yeah, so if I look at the laboratory practice 10 years ago and even beyond, like few years ago, most of the pathology diagnoses were based on electron microscopy. And then it was replaced by immunohistochemistry. And then the flow cytometry came back in late 80s, early 90s. And then we all know about the PCR and the Nobel Prize for given for the PCR. And the next generation sequencing came, and now artificial intelligence. So we have seen in 10 years to 20 years or 30 years of journey that there have been very different peaks of innovation and new technology. And when I look back also 10 years ago, and look at the pathologist and the technologist, um, residency programs are not increasing. Pathologists are still, there's a deficit between the supply and the demand. And same thing with the clinical lab scientists or technologists. Many years ago, these technology programs were like a lot. Now they are shrinking. Funding has been reduced, especially the cytogenetic screening program. So it has always been a challenge in last 10 years or so. The key thing is, if you have a demand and the supply gap, the only way you can fulfill this gap or fill this gap is through technology, right? And technology is really the solution for fulfilling this gap. So I mean, you can see that these days, like kids, they cannot handwrite, right? Handwriting skill is disappearing from kids. So you
It's
have to
so
come up with
true.
sort of e-requisition or electronic way of submitting orders. So some of those basic skills are being disappearing, and I think we need to embrace the technology to fill the gap between demand and the supply, and that what I have seen been happening in the last 10 or 15 years.
That's incredible. You know, when you say that, I was in Alabama recently visiting a laboratory that had gone completely robotic. And I went in that and I'd never seen something like that before. And it took my breath away. There was not even any processors. I mean, it was 100% robotic, and it blew my mind away. I mean, I wanted to stay there all day. It was really cool. And you bring up a really good point that diagnostic technology has advanced so rapidly. So talk a little bit about like how is CorePath maneuvering and working with, and what are you doing to leverage some of these advancements specific to pathology and AI, and what are some of the things that you're doing?
Yeah. So first of all, since you mentioned about robotics and robots in the laboratory, I mean, a couple of things that are good about robots. There's not going to be any sick leave call, and, and there's not going to be any personal issues. We
That's funny.
spend more of our time.
That's good.
So, coming to your question about how the CorePath has been leveraging into advancement, I think one message that I would like to convey to my colleagues in pathology is technology is not going to replace pathologists, but it will for sure replace to those pathologists who are not going to embrace technology. I think it's very important in our own lifetime. We can look at the example of Sears, the big departmental store that we used to have. I mean, they were close to 1% GDP of US market, right? And not embracing technology, wiped away and then replaced by Amazon, right? If you look at the Kodak that we have back then, did not embrace much of the technology, and now we have smartphones and all those kind of things. We all were kids, we all were teenagers. We used to go on the weekend to get the blockbuster movies and Dropbox and those kind of things. Again, the technology was not embraced by them and has been replaced by Netflix and things like that. I think same thing is happening in pathology. If we are not going to embrace pathology, even now, like some of the academic centers are embracing, and they are no longer buying any microscopes. So microscopes are eventually going to disappear and everything is becoming digitized. So these days, like kids and younger residents and fellows who are graduating, they're more in the digital world, right? So what does it mean to CorePath and other things that we have done? First of all, we brought a lot of state-of-the-art technology. Of course, morphology is always a gold standard in pathology, but an additional technology like next generation sequencing, looking at the DNA and RNA sequencing and liquid biopsies are the key things now. Because anytime, my suggestion to any cancer patient is anyone who's going to have a diagnosis of cancer, they need to take at least two advice. One is always get a second opinion. Nothing hurt to get a second opinion, and always go with what the clinical trials and what's best out in the market, because every day the things are changing based on our DNA and RNA genomic profile by NGS. So every patient needs to have a good chance of being cured and longevity of the life in a quality manner. So I think genetics is a big thing that was very good for CorePath. Of course, digital pathology is something very important, and that came hand in hand. We have our robust LabWiser LIS that integrated nicely with any digital scanner that we have. And on top of that, you add the AI algorithm. So if you have all those kind of things, I mean, I have been talking to pathologists. Will say we live in a very traffic crowded place. It take them like 1 hour coming to work and 1 hour going back. So why not those 2 hours can be utilized remotely, doing the digital work and stuff. So all these kind of things added up the efficiency of the work, and things are changing. I think the leaders and the managers need to understand how to be more efficient with these technology.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. And, it kind of leads me to my next thought with this is that with all of these technologies that lab owners, have to consider for their lab, I mean, how do they go about making the decision whether they invest in outsourcing that or maybe building it themselves? And what's been your strategy and how do you look at that?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, that's a question that has been posed to us as a executive of the practice or as a president or the medical director, right? So I look at this more like a different approach that you cannot be comparing the test by test and the volume by volume, but you need to look at the whole approach here. Of course, the volume is very important, whether you are dealing with a low volume or high volume, and the turnaround time, right? It does not matter that you are saving $100 while the patient is waiting one day in the hospital. I mean, one day in the hospital can cost like $20,000, $30,000, right? So you need
Yeah.
to look at the whole holistic approach of, okay, what's going to be the volume, what is the expected turnaround time, and how it's going to impact the patient care, how the access to technology is easily available, and how you're going to have human expertise. I mean, it is said that a fool with a tool is still going to be a fool, right? So not only you need to have a technology, but you need to have human capital, the expertise that are sometimes limited available for these technologies. So these are the main factors that I think are important for making the decision about the buy versus build out. What we did was we invested a lot of efforts in addition to the scientific growth of CorePath into the laboratory information system, into the RCM, into the AI and the digitization. I mean, on top of the cost, you have heard every week there's cybersecurity attack and things like that. So that's also very critically important, that how you can protect the fire, all those firewalls and things like that. LabVisor story, I told you that it's one of the key feature for the success of CorePath, that we have a very robust, customizable, LabVisor as an LIS. And it's kind of interesting. When my son was admitted at UT Austin as an undergrad, the UT Austin dean said to this kid that we know that whatever, I mean, this is Austin, whatever happened in the change in the world happened in Austin first. But the point he was trying to make was these kids, by the time they are going to graduate or retire, those jobs are not even identified yet, right? So we need to be very forward thinker and see what's coming. Need to look at the short term strategy and the long term strategy. But when I look at CorePath, I think the real investment, our investment was more into the integration of pathology report in a very cloud based approach, including digitization and the AI algorithms.
Wow, no, that's very good advice. Thank you very much for that. I think with all of these technological advancements, I think collaborations around the world are probably much easier than at least they ever were when we first got into the industry, right? And I would be very interested to have you share with our audience some of the things that CorePath is doing to help with underserved communities, and more on from a global perspective.
Yeah, it's a very interesting question. I mean, on one side we are talking about underserved communities, and on the other side we are talking about globalization, right? And I can tell you that even in United States, there are practices that are being practiced more like an underserved category, right? What I mean, like these pathologists don't have access to the current technology, and they don't have access to the current terminology, and cancer patient can diagnose anywhere. So the approach that we have taken is we have some practices here within CorePath that are truly in the underserved areas, and it's very difficult to find pathologists there. So what we have done is we have find like a clinical lab scientist or the PA. They can do the grossing and stuff like that, make the slides ready, and we can digitize it. Once you digitize the slides remotely, then you can access these slides remotely in a cloud-based operation. So not only we improve the turnaround time, we use the technology in the underserved areas. Now, if you talk about globalization and how the access to the care is going to be available, one thing that we have taken is we have launched a program called HemePath Hub, which is anyone who would like to have a hematopathology learning from anywhere in the world, they can come to CorePath and gain the knowledge of learning, right? So we have one intern who secured the scholarship through one of the foundation here in United States. He came from Africa, all the way from Africa, and he spent like a good 3 months with us. Just for him, he was saying that sitting down with the pathologist at the microscope was a privilege to him, that he has never experienced it before. So, and he's dealing with all these kinds of cancer diagnoses. His focus was more on the breast cancer. So the basic skill that he acquired, he took that away, and now, he's making some changes happening in Africa and making the cancer diagnosis, which is relatively in line with the recent trend. I can give example of Mexico. I mean, just across the border, there are opportunities that we have been helping with how to brand CorePath, or at least do the same technology using the digitization and the access to the care. I have one hospital, which is a hospital, Indus Hospital in Pakistan, 100% charitable organization. They have the technology of genetics and cytogenetics, but the human capital was missing, right? So we have like technologists coming all the way from there, spend a year at CorePath learning the laboratory and hands-on experience, and took the technology back, and now they are CAP accredited back there, and they have been doing amazing work with cytogenetics and genetics, and everything was based on the cloud-based learning. So the key thing that we have done is how to really improve and help the human capital in different part of the world, and also using the technology in the underserved here in the United States.
That's incredible. I'm just sitting back like in awe, thinking to myself, you really are living your purpose. I wrote a second book called Clues, and it's all about helping people find their purpose. And you are definitely living your purpose. I'm really excited to hear about the things that you're doing and CorePath is doing. And I also understand that you have received several teaching awards and have trained medical students, clinical lab scientists, residents, and fellows. Now, how do you mentor them, and what advice would you have for them in general and with the overall pathology community?
Yeah, that's a great question, and that's basically every student getting into the pathology basically asks me. And my advice to them is pathology is a great field. I mean, based on the discussion that we are having, it's truly a quarterback in the healthcare pathologists are. So no matter what you do, at least if you're doing pathology, love what you do, and do what you love, right? That's really the important thing. Work for your passion, and you will never work again. I mean, that's really the key for any field. Um, don't feel that you need to be in limelight to make an impact for the patient care. You are already doing and helping hundreds and millions of patients behind the scene to impact the humanity. And coming back to our title of the podcast, that the quarterbacks are not the ones that are going to be scoring high and things like that, but they are the anchors and keep the team pushing forward, right? So that's really the job of pathology, uh, not to be in the limelight, but enough there to help the patient in different scenarios that I just mentioned in the early part of the podcast.
Now, I think that's amazing. I'm sure that our listeners today are really excited about what they've learned. I'm sure they're also going to want to know how to get in touch with you. Now, what's the best way for anybody that's listening today that wants to reach out to you, that may have a question for you? What's the best way for them to get in contact with you?
Absolutely happy to. My first initial A, Ehsan, EHSAN, at corepath.us.
Thank you, Dr. Ehsan. Today has been amazing to have you on this podcast. I am 100% convinced that pathologists are the quarterback of healthcare. Today was just simply amazing. And for our viewers out there, if you're just tuning in, we like to put all of our podcasts on www.advancedstrategicpartners.com, which is the brokerage firm that I run, Advanced Strategic Partners. They're also available now on YouTube, Spotify, or Apple. I sincerely hope that you enjoyed today's episode of The End Game. And until 2 weeks from now, I'm signing off as your host. And thank you again, Dr. Ehsan. It was wonderful having you on today's podcast.
Thank you, Melissa. It was great to have you here. And it was wonderful question that you posed. And I hope that some of the question might have helped my pathology community.
Thank you.
Thank you. Take care.